Hello and welcome to Dateline New Haven on WNHH-FM. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make New Haven tick. Mayor Toni Harp always makes New Haven tick, even when it's really hot and muggy, morning and night. She's here in the WNHH studio for her weekly Mayor Monday checkup, up on what she and we are up to in the Elm City. If you have a question for the mayor, feel free to pop it to us via Facebook Live at the New Haven Independence site. And you can also go to you can listen to Bob calling on the radio. You'll see the video there. And thanks to Gateway Community College and Bertram Moses PC for providing financial support for today's program. Well, welcome, Toni. Hey, nice to see you.
Great seeing you. How you been?
Good. Now, you've been traveling.
Yes.
You went to Kansas City. Kansas City, here you went.
I know. It's hot in Kansas City, too.
It is?
Oh, my goodness. It was like 101. You know, there was a little humidity. I mean, it made it seem balmy and cool here.
Okay. That's a different perspective.
Yeah.
Hey, we can't complain.
No, we can't.
And, so what did you do in Kansas City? You went to a foundation called the Kaufman Foundation.
Yep. It's the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation, and they have a particular interest in entrepreneurism. And so the conference was for mayors, and it was about building the entrepreneurial ecosystem.
I love phrases like that because they really do mean something. That's why we got a Connecticut Next grant, right, from
Right.
the state.
Mm-hmm.
You want to build the kind of businesses that help entrepreneurs get together and get access to money and share ideas and hire people. But I love that ecosystem. I'm always thinking like fish eating little fish getting eaten by big fish. Or like, water going down the drain, then go in the cloud and come back down when it rains.
Yeah.
So what did you come back with? Anything specific?
Well, it was really interesting, all the different types of people. The first part was basically for mayors, and it included some of the support groups that helped to try to build these things. And then the next group that we were with for about a day were people that were actually building these ecosystems throughout the country.
And is it like what we're doing with CT Next, or is it something different?
It is similar to what they ultimately would like to do, and this was later on, is to develop a profession around people that had a certain set of skills that could bring these things together. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. But it really is, what is it that you need to do in order to make your city attractive to people who want to start businesses.
So it's about startup culture.
It's about startup and then ultimately maintaining it, but basically startup.
So we have the district. You're not supposed to say the. Got to think of the marketing. District in Fairhaven is about to start up. That's an incubator for more tech-oriented small businesses right by the Mill River there on James and State. We already have had Science Park, obviously, 300 George Street. Where do we go next? What did you pick up any specifics of something we might do with that?
Well, one of the things that they really spoke a lot about is the changing demographics of America and how everything that we do around building the this whole ecosystem has to include, in a very intentional way, diversity and collaboration and finding ways for folks to collaborate.
Well, Margaret and Caroline, who did that organization, is being funded in New Haven on Connecticut Next. They're trying to do that. They have these events where they have people from neighborhoods, often of color, who want to start some business in the same room as people who've come from Yale, might not be of color, maybe are, about and get them at sharing ideas and how they could do stuff. I'm wondering what other ideas might be in the pipeline.
Well, the other thing is, how do you then attract funders?
Okay.
I met it was very interactive, so that we were in groups a lot of times, and we were in geographic groups. So I met a couple of people who help people. Say you have a medical device idea, and you want to get it patented, and then you want to get someone to invest in your idea. Then you want to get it to market. There are groups of people that help people do that. And so I thought that was an interesting thing to know and really important for entrepreneurs who just don't know where to start.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the work that we are doing here with Connecticut Next is really an important part of that work, but it actually goes way beyond. I met a young man who went to high school with my daughter, and he is running um, he's running a kitchen that you can buy into, a commercial kitchen in Harlem, and he's helped to start companies that make all these different types of bread.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, and he's from New Haven.
Wow.
So
Oh.
I thought that was kind of interesting. And one of the things that we've been trying to figure out how to do, which is really not a Connecticut Next initiative, but might be a food policy initiative. When Gateway moved to its new building, they gave us all their old commercial kitchen appliances and things, and they've been sitting now for a number of years. And what we've wanted to do is to create a commercial kitchen that people who want to manufacture food items can come and use, because you really can't do it unless you're in a commercial kitchen. And that's important, as you may know Mubaraka Abdusabar.
Sweet potato pie.
And she's doing, bean pie.
Oh, bean pie, excuse me. Bean pies. Got it wrong. They're not vegan, so I didn't eat them.
Yeah. And she has to...
She borrows space at Katerina's Cupcake.
That's right. In order to be able to make a commercial
product. And she
product.
wants to go bigger, I'm sure.
I'm sure she does. Kitchen. And there were a number of people. I know a woman that I met that made certain kinds of relishes, and she ended up having to leave town because she couldn't really be supported.
And that's the point, right? At CONCAT, the agency in New Hallville, they have a program to develop people who have culinary ideas.
Right. And so I don't know if they are just doing it for the market that exists here in terms of restaurants, or if they're actually pushing entrepreneurism, which is pretty much what this group would do. So if you have something...
What a good idea.
Yeah, so you make really great barbecue sauce and you want to promote it, there really ought to be an ecosystem that helps to support.
So now your administration originally had a place for that. Unless I'm getting it wrong, I'm confusing it with something else. You wanted to put a commercial culinary kitchen in the old Armory on Gough Street, because there's a lot of unused space. Whatever happened with that?
Well, we're still working on it. It costs money, and before we can put anything of substance in there, we have to improve the building. We got a leaky roof, so.
I imagine it's an old building, big building. I'm sure it's got a lot of problems.
Right.
Used to be for the National Guard. Alder Hajibe Charabosulu says, hello, good morning, Mayor.
Good morning.
Good morning, Haji. Nice to hear from you. You're listening to Mayor Monday on WNHH-FM. And I think we have a call from, okay, I'm going to guess. We're going to do the ESP Uri Geller thing.
All right.
I'm feeling Bob.
Okay.
Hello, you're on Mayor Monday.
Hello, Paul.
It's Bob. How are you? All right, we got it right.
You are psychic, Paul.
Hey, Mayor, I happened to see you on the green. I saw you on TV. You read to some kids.
Yes.
On Friday. How did that go?
It's always so much fun. LEAP has its read-in on the green every year, and it's great to go out there and read with the kids. They seem to be really excited about it. They love being on our green. They love all of the volunteers that come out. Henry Fernandez is doing a great job with pushing reading and pushing our young people who are mentors to even younger people. What a great program LEAP is.
What book did you read, and how old was the kid?
I can't remember the name of the book. I think it was about Bill. And my group
Bill gets in a lot of those books.
Yeah. In all disclosure, I couldn't read this year. So.
Oh, you didn't read?
I didn't read. I was there, though, but I couldn't
That's
read.
okay.
I had a meeting in the office.
But you went?
I went.
There were tons of people. You know what I love? My favorite, we always write, because we're typical journalists, we always write about the prominent people who read. But our favorite ones is Lucy Gilman one year wrote about how kids who came up through LEAP and were read too, and then really got into reading, they're now counselors as adults, or they have other jobs. They come back and they read. It's a big read-in. So we had be-ins and those kind of things in the 60s. Now we have read-ins, which is a great idea, and tons of people come. Bob, do you have any other questions for the mayor?
Sure, I actually do, Paul. And they concern, one is local, one is national question, and they concern the police force. And I guess my first question is, I believe today is the anniversary of Tyreek Keys' death. Where do we stand with that investigation, or can you give us
You know what? I will have
any
to check
answers?
into that. I will say to you that I have not heard that we've made progress. But I will let you know at our next.
So, Bob, the
Mayor
last I
Monday.
heard is that they just can't get an eyewitness to come forward. We know there were eyewitnesses, and this was, I guess, 14-year-old boy who was killed in the
Yep.
Hallville. And there have been a lot of theories whether it was random. It doesn't, to me, from what I was hearing, it didn't sound random, but that's what they're saying publicly now.
Mhm.
And, even though murders have been down, they're ticked up back this year, but, down from where they were. This one really hit the community because it's a 14-year-old boy in his own
Right.
neighborhood. But they are
Okay,
kind of
my other
stuck on the
question
eyewitness.
is, Paul, is it's been in the news a lot lately, and I'm wondering if the mayor has sat down and talked to the police chief. Lately, I now hear CVS has apologized to an African American customer for calling the police on them. Have you talked to the chief, Mayor? Are we just handling calls as they are? If a Caucasian calls on an African American, where do we go from there with that? It's been in
Like
the
the
news a
Yale
lot.
incident, yeah.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that hopefully they're responding to the call with great sensitivity. I think they learned a lot with the Yale call, that there oftentimes are multiple reasons, some of which are not good, that people call the police in the first place. And so I believe that our police force is the best trained around these issues, probably in the state, but they've got even more to learn. And it's my hope that they learn from the Yale event that you don't treat any one group differently than you do another group. And I'm certain that they've learned that, and it's my hope that when these calls are made, that they will take that experience with them and not jump to conclusions.
It
All right.
seems like the Yale incident. I guess in the incident there were students, one African American, one Caucasian. It seems like it just went around the country at that point.
That night, she did it on Facebook Live.
Yeah, I think that it's.
I'm talking about that, but I'm talking about other incidents like a pool incident or this incident or that incident.
Well, it happens all the time. There are microaggressions, and oftentimes the police are used, unfortunately, to reinforce those microaggressions against people of color.
You wouldn't mind going a little more directly in the mic?
Okay.
Thanks. Oh, that's
yes.
much better.
I'm
All right,
sorry.
thanks, Bob. No, don't apologize.
All right, talk to you later.
Have a great week, buddy. Babs Alexander writes in on Facebook. Hello, Mayor. You got an exclamation point this morning.
Hey, Babs, how you doing?
We are excited to be having teen camp in the evening in the great city of New Haven. Another exclamation point. Please join us for their performance of In the Heights, August 3rd through 4th. All right, thanks for checking in, Babs Alexander. Good
All
to meet you
right.
sometime. So last week, Mayor, I didn't notice on the Facebook Live we had a question from Aaron Good.
Okay.
So get smart. Regarding the budget, so I promised I'd do it this week. Are there circumstances or particular indicators under which Mayor Harp would support moving New Haven to Tier 3 or Tier 4 supervision under the state's Municipal Accountability Review Board? That means, do we give up control of our finances in part or whole to get a bailout from the state?
I don't think that we're there. And the other, so I would say we have looked into it, but
We have.
yes, we went. I didn't go, but my finance staff went to meet with the Secretary of the Office of Policy and
Ben
Management,
Barnes.
Ben Barnes, and we took a look at whether or not we were appropriate for the MARB, and we don't believe that we are. I think that is really one of the things that you do when you have no other options, and we certainly don't believe that we're there yet, and I don't believe that the Secretary believes we're there.
So
either.
that was kind of an agreement. How recent did they go?
It was about 2.5 weeks ago.
Okay. So what are our other options? We've
Well,
talked about
I
this a lot.
mean-
I don't mean to go over all old ground. I just mean if in
Well,
broad
no, I
ways.
mean we have to find a way to cover our debt for last year, and we have we figured out how to do that.
Well, you have.
Yeah, we're going to refinance bonds,
Mm-hmm.
and get the savings to take care of that. And so hopefully by the middle of August, all that, before we close the books, all that will be taken care of. And then we are going to also look at doing a 5-year budget so that we can begin to plan for some of these things that that happen ultimately. We've got to work on making sure that we have a greater fund balance. We'll be able to balance the budget this year, but we've got to make sure that we have our savings account or a rainy day fund so that if there are things that happen at the state level like they did this year, that we'll be able to handle them without a problem. And then the other thing that my controller keeps saying is that every 5 years when we reassess our property, that we should also let those who give us a voluntary payment in lieu of taxes, if we do a 5-year projection, that they will know that our expectation is that they increase that as well.
All right, interesting time. So what point does a municipality become ready for MARB? I mean, West Haven's done it. Hartford's done it.
I think if you're going to go bankrupt if you don't, and I think that they were both in very precarious positions.
What was the root of theirs? Like in West Haven, how did it get so bad there? Do we know?
I have no idea. I don't know what caused their problems, but it was multiple years of having difficulty balancing the budget.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, good. We're balancing this one. There was a big story on Friday. Christopher Peak wrote in The Independent. He was at a community meeting in the Nice Square last week. And at the end, they said, hey, they finally found a buyer for that most of the apartments. There was McCormick Barron, which built the Nice Square under a new name with another company. They still own the place, 335 rental apartments, 50,000 square feet of commercial, all along the Nice Square, which is south of Chapel Street there, between State and Church. And they built a great neighborhood. It's mixed income, but they really had huge debts. And CHAFA, the state Connecticut Housing Finance Administration, they own, I think it was like $80 million or something too. They owe the city for loans we gave them. Mm-hmm. They never paid back, and they were trying to refinance. And Chris got the Beacon Companies, which does, I think they own and doing a good job with Monterey Place, right? Same company in Boston. And they confirmed to us that they have under contract to buy that development. They have to they have to negotiate with CHAFA and with the city about what's going to happen with all those debts and with their taxes. When we wrote the story, we couldn't get any specifics because you guys are negotiating. So I guess is the general principle, because that's been publicly discussed before the sale, that we want to make sure there's still affordable housing there, and we'll continue to give them some kind of break, or? Yeah,
I think the general principle is that we will maintain the current level of affordable housing.
Isn't that like 40% in some places?
It's more than that.
That's great.
It
I mean,
great,
you walk in the neighborhood, you don't feel like you're in a public housing development, although
right.
Even those have changed. Mm-hmm. But I mean, you really have like upscale stuff, mid-scale stuff. You got families of all income levels right in the center of town, and it looks good. Don't you agree?
I think it looks really good. So I think that we're excited that we have a buyer that wants to reinvest in the property, wants to do renovation. There's some minor renovation that needs to occur there.
What kind of stuff?
And, just going in, looking at the kitchens, making sure the roofs and other kinds of things are in good repair. So it's minor, but would make it more for those that pay market rent, and those that don't. Frankly, it would make it more attractive if they were remodeled. The project is almost 25 years old, so
right.
it's time.
That generation. Yeah. So now, when you ran for mayor in 2013, and this was on the table at the time, you said you didn't commit to a position, but you said you were skeptical that the city should extend any tax abatements. Their tax abatements are running out. They got a tax abatement to build that project. Now they're supposed to pay full taxes, and anyone wanting to buy it said we really can't go to pay full taxes and make it work with affordable housing. You got to let us have some kind of break. And what was on the table before was that you'd maybe let them pay. They would pay $1.3 million if it were full, and they maybe would forgive as much as 2/3 of that. Is that still on the table?
Honestly, we will have to check with. We're in the middle of doing this.
Okay, so you don't want to go specifics.
No.
That's the tricky thing. How do we talk about this publicly? Because we do need to talk about principles, because the public wants to know what we're going for.
I think
but if you give us specifics, you can't negotiate, right?
Yeah, and I think that we will likely have to we will likely have to um, give some sort of tax break just to maintain the affordability. So I think that I know there's some people who don't want to give any, but I believe that we will probably have to do something.
And I remember when we reported this last fall, because we couldn't get anything new and updated for this story, but when we reported last fall, the president of the board, Aldous Taisha Walker, was on board with some kind of tax break to keep it affordable. I guess I guess that general consensus is there. But when you negotiate, I guess publicly, how do you strike that balance between letting the public know what you're fighting for and not giving away what you're negotiating so that you can negotiate?
I know,
like
it's
with
really
labor contracts.
It's really hard to do.
Different from private
but
sector.
I think that what we want people to know is that the principle of downtown housing is important. The principle of mixed income is important.
Mm-hmm.
The principle of maintaining the current affordable units is really important to the city, and those are the values that we're going to be fighting for. We also want this developer to be successful, and we are also very concerned about the empty retail space that is down there, making sure they're going to get the kind of retail vitality that was almost there.
I kind of think it was. I mean, I can think of so many places down there. I mean, I remember that debate when you were on the board of Alders. Remember that whole debate about the nice square? And I remember feeling it was a little bit forced because we all liked the Jane Jacobs idea, storefront on the first floor, 2 or 3 apartments levels above. And she fought for that in urban renewal in the 50s and 60s because that was destroyed. Organically, the market had created that. People invested in buildings. They had a store on the first floor, and it was mixed. But I kind of felt it became a fetish. That like they tried to take Jane Jacobs. That was her example. But her core philosophy was let the market work organically.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like with Nice Square, they tried to force that. And that's why we had empty storefronts for so long. But I think they did okay. I know there have been a lot of new ones that have gotten empty, but isn't that cyclical?
It might be cyclical, but I think you've got to have a developer who understands how important that is to our city and is going to be working really hard to fill those spaces.
And without going to the subject we went last week in detail, if Live, Work, Learn, Play had built on the Coliseum like they said they'd be finished by now, you'd have thousands of more people living right there and going to stores.
You would, but you'd also have more shops. So
that's
yeah.
right. Competition. Okay, that's a good point. Okay, the market's going to shake out where the market shakes out.
Right.
But what did change your mind from 2013? Or not necessarily change your mind. How did your thinking evolve? Because you didn't commit saying definitely. You said you were skeptical about extending tax breaks because the numbers worked when you first approved it.
Well, but they were supposed to work. And I think ultimately what I learned is that the numbers didn't work.
In other words, if you're going to have affordable housing, like if you're going to let things go with the market, then they don't need any breaks.
Right.
If we decide we want affordable housing, then you think to make the numbers work, you have to have some support?
I think so. And I think that affordable housing is really important to us. And maintaining the balance that we currently have is important to us because they could come in and say, we'd like to do market level housing and we'll do 25% affordable. And in some places, if they're new, maybe that's something you want to do. Well, not when we already have nearly 50%.
And you don't want people kicked out.
No, exactly.
It's kind of interesting because that is one of those examples that you get competing demands, sometimes from the same people in the city. And as mayor, you have to take the heat whichever way you go.
Right.
So people are very upset about taxes. They said, don't give anyone tax breaks because then that gets passed along to us. Although I would argue if sometimes like with the artist housing development, that's not artist technically anymore on Hamilton Street, that's creating tax revenue we wouldn't have gotten anyway. But pushing that aside, sometimes you give a tax break and they say, well, then we're going to have to pick it up. But you also get slammed, not you personally, I mean the government, which I think is legitimate, like do something about affordable housing. We're losing affordable housing or we need more. I don't know if we're losing, we need more. And sometimes you got to do one at the expense of the other.
Well, sometimes, but at least you need to keep in mind what your values are and what you're trying to achieve for the city. And we want to make sure that everyone can live in New Haven who wants to live in New Haven, and it shouldn't be dependent upon your income.
Well, Alex Torvis writes, my mom wanted me to pass on the message that she's loving your new look, Tony.
Ah, well, that's nice. Thank you.
And thanks for listening, Alex, and commenting. Same with Cal Me Cal, and I apologize if I'm saying your name wrong. Gives you a thumbs up as well. Thanks for listening to Mayor Monday, which is on WNHH-FM, live streamed at newhavenindependent.org and at 103.5
And you
FM.
know what, Paul, you would be a great example of the entrepreneurs that they were doing a lot of talking about, and how you've kind of expanded what you've done, but you've also done it in a way that includes the whole population of our town in terms of
Oh,
people
thank
who
you.
work for you. And so you would be a role model for
All
what
right.
the new entrepreneur ought to be doing.
Thank you very much for that thumbs up. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. I wanted to ask you about Affordable Housing Task Force.
Yeah.
You know, while we were arguing about what to do with Duncan Hotel, instead we decided to create a task force so we really figure out what are the solutions with affordable housing. And again, there are a lot of trade-offs. Because there are people who argue, by the way, and again, this is way beyond my grade level, pay level, that you let the market rate housing get built, and that creates more supply, and in fact, that makes more opportunity. Other housing gets more competitive, and that it helps the tax base grow and not raise taxes so much so rents don't go up. There are actually a lot of theories that go into the realm of economics that where well-intentioned, smart people have very different ideas. It's kind of hard to know what's right.
I think that the opportunity is that with all of the new housing that's being built, if it's mixed use, and that's another value that so many folks have, then that means that you have certainly people who can pay the market rent, have wonderful places to live, but also people who have difficulty paying a market rent do. And I think that to me is what we really want. We really want to have the mixed use. And yes, I think the economy will sort of shake it all out. But what ultimately ends up happening, and if you look at some of our older, real old housing that we've had to close, that's the kind of housing people are actually paying too much to live there. It's blighted, and we ultimately end up losing even more of that. I think it was Norton Street.
66 Norton.
Yeah,
That
where
was a
we
big
had
one.
that problem.
Yeah.
And so that's not what we want in our city.
All right. And, you know, it's so interesting. You brought up an idea I had heard about a week or two ago about what we're going to do about Church Street South when we rebuild it. You know, we want 900 to 1,000 units, but we want to include those 300 affordable housing
Right.
subsidized units we lost. And one idea you had was if we can't, we're going for a $30 million federal grant that's hard to get, and we're asking for more than they usually give. If we don't get that, but as you argued, HUD had a real hand in what went wrong at Church Street South. So if they had a conscience, that would be a done deal. But government is not
evidently.
conscious. Yeah. But one idea you had, I asked you about an idea Washington had, which is that they just require developers of buying city land for market rate housing or getting city approvals to include extra high rents on the market rate to subsidize affordable units rather than having a subsidy. And you had a third idea, which is that the city owns a sliver of that Church Street South, more than a sliver, a portion of that Church Street South land that's being cleared right now. They're demolishing the old projects. And that you thought maybe the city could find a nonprofit developer to affordable units on that portion to make the rest market rate. Any updates?
No, I think that staff is still working on ideas, and so we'll see where we end up. But I think that we are looking at housing as well. It's right across from the train station. Should there not be another economic use, perhaps laboratories and other kinds of things there as well, so that we don't miss this opportunity to build some real economic development there.
You're tiptoeing toward one of those buzzwords.
What's that?
TOD.
Yes.
Transit-oriented development.
Yes.
You got to keep them straight when you go to all those. You must have to have a little thesaurus when you go to all your meetings.
Well, you almost have to at least be able to say, excuse me, what was that acronym again?
Now, we had big news this morning in a case where New Haven people you know well are playing quite a big role. Judge Victor Bolden, who was the corporation counsel for the city. Was he still a corporation counsel when you became mayor?
Yes, he was.
Great guy.
Great guy.
He was like the hometown guy who made the Knicks. You know, like he became the federal judge and the whole city was proud. Because he was the kind of guy, he'd be in the most divisive controversy in town, whether it was immigration or the firefighters. And everybody would say, you know, he's so reasonable to talk to. He always depersonalized that he was smart and competent, and there were never any of those side issues that distracted. So he became a federal judge, and he just had his day in the sun.
All right.
So in the last week, Yale lawyers and Connecticut Legal Services are gotten into that big issue about separated families, undocumented immigrants at the borders. And there are two kids being kept in Connecticut. And they really saw a lot of trauma, both in Honduras and El Salvador for the left, where the father was targeted for killing, and they were going to get the kid. And then when they got here, the parents were kept in Texas, and the kids were sent up here under the new Trump policy that's now being unwound. And they were kept in what's called people call the ice box, and you're not allowed to touch other people,
geez.
including your siblings. But in any case, last week they went to court in Bridgeport, federal court, to say bring those back together. And the judge was Victor Bolden.
Mm.
And they tried a new argument. They said that it's not just the parents whose rights are violated, it's the kids whose rights are violated under the Constitution, their rights. And they focused on the trauma that they experience.
Mm-hmm.
So Andres Martin, I don't know if you know him or not, from Westville as well, lives a couple of blocks from Victor Bolden in New Haven. He was the child psychologist, Yale Child Study. He spent hours with these kids.
Mm.
And he reported on the stand at length about the trauma they've experienced so far, the PTSD they already have, and how it's going to play out short-term and long-term in their life. And they said you have to get them back together. So the Judge Bolden, first judge in the country, ruled Friday that the kids' constitutional rights were violated as well as the parents. And he said, I can't order you to release the parents right away because there's another case about that in California, in L.A., and in federal court, and those same parents are plaintiffs in that. But you have to have them in video conferences every day. You have to bring the parents to my courtroom this coming Wednesday to have a status conference and have them talk and think about how we're going to make this happen. And then this morning, John Durham, the U.S. Attorney from Connecticut, I'm always wondering how the U.S. attorneys deal with having a new boss with such radically different views from their old boss. So you had Eric Holder at the U.S. Attorney with they were doing a lot of deportations, but they weren't going after nonviolent people. They weren't separating families. And now you have a new boss who's saying, we're going to go hardball. But he said we're releasing him on parole, releasing the parents. That happened just this morning.
Wow.
The parents are out, so I'm guessing they're going to reunite on Wednesday. Obviously, you've been on the side of Joe. What do you think of Judge Bolden and his role there?
I'm really proud of him. I think that's it's a wonderful way for him to validate the humanity of America, and so I'm proud of what he's done on behalf of the young people here, and hopefully it will transition to the young people across the United States. They do have rights.
So within people who are critical of Trump administration, there's been interesting sub-debate among African Americans who are starting to argue, yeah, we don't want those families separated, but we've been having black families separated on a much larger scale from the criminal justice system with the same kind of trauma in the kids. Why aren't people talking about that? Which I thought was a very interesting perspective as well.
Well, and it is an interesting perspective because we know that children who have family members who've been incarcerated are more likely to be incarcerated themselves later in life. And so it's something that I know Tony Walker and I, when we were in the General Assembly, worked on, tried to get resources throughout the state to help these young people who have had to deal with that trauma. So it is a problem, and it has happened.
And in fact, I remember before you left the state Senate, you were leading a charge after Newtown to have trauma specialists and other kind of social service help at all the public schools because there's such a high percentage of kids who had. They started, I guess, if you have 4 instances of PTSD, they say it's really.
Yeah, it reduces the number of years that you live. It's as bad as smoking.
But we don't have to talk about marijuana because we did last week about PTSD. Instead, I'll give you a question from Kamari Cooper, and I'm very sorry I don't have your first name pronunciation. I guess it is easy just to write. You could try to spell names right, and you don't get to say them wrong. Mayor Harp, what is the plan to encourage police officers to stay on the police force against leaving for better benefits? We've talked about this a lot. Hamden offers $30,000 more per cop. Better health benefits. They come to our graduations to start scoping out like baseball scouts, who they're going to get in 2 years after we paid $60,000 to train them. Any updated answers? Because that's a big issue.
Well, one of the things that we had hoped to do was to put some things in the contract that would keep our officers here. I know that for the first 2 years they get the same salary. We were hoping in the second year to improve it somewhat. And so now that it's gone into binding arbitration, there isn't a whole lot.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot that we can do. We do have a pension fund, which other departments don't have. They usually use the 401ks and that sort of thing. But so that on the back end, it's better for New Haven officers. But for those young officers that are just looking for money up front, it's difficult. We also wanted, because it costs us about $65,000 to train these folks, and because when they're being trained, they're also being paid.
Oh, that's right.
For 2 years, so it costs us a lot
That's
of
even
money
more,
to
yeah.
train.
Does that
And
include that salary? That doesn't include the salary when you could say it costs them 60,000
yeah,
to
I
train.
think so. Yeah, it includes the salary. And so one of the things that after having paid all of this to train everyone, we had a bill that we took to the legislature to try to require the poaching departments to pay us more. Now the requirement is on the individual police officer.
But the department's making up because it's small enough that it's worth.
It's really small.
It's like
It's like
$4,000.
it's about 4,000. We wanted it to be higher and for it to be paid by the.
So wait, I'm trying to get this straight. So a legislature that's dominated by suburbs that get to, in
I
yet
know.
another way,
You
steal
wonder
from
why
New
we couldn't
Haven
pass it.
and poach it and get an incredible bargain at the expense of New Haven, didn't want to change the rules.
No, they didn't. Go figure.
Okay, I'll go figure. Kamari writes back and says it's pronounced Kamari. Thank you. I hope I said it right this time. No, I really do. I think that matters a lot. You
It
know,
does.
I mean, I got it. I'm not great at it. I like to say people's names right. There was an interesting debate that came up at the Board of Ed last week out of
Mhm.
nowhere.
Mhm.
So for years, Yale has had this study where I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they pay New Haven, like we get
Mhm.
money for it, and they're trying to figure out some of the genetic roots of dyslexia. So they get kids and they get their DNA for samples, and they are doing a study to try to cure or alleviate dyslexia. When this came up, it just happened to be a white researcher
Mhm.
who I know is a active parent at Columbus Family Academy, for what that's worth. And when it came up, the Board of Ed is largely people of color, and to them it resonated so differently. People started bringing up Henrietta Lacks, the woman who
Mhm.
wasn't told that she was, the subject of experiments that people made lots of money on, and she never got a cent from. And there was a lot of concern, and they want to now have a whole discussion about this project. How did you feel about that? It was kind of
Well,
interesting.
I think that I was one of the ones that expressed concern. I will say to you that they never once during that whole discussion until the very end connected it with dyslexia. So if you can,
Oh.
so no one ever knew. They just thought there was this broad study of reading and genetics, and so we are going to be having a hearing on it on July 18th, Teaching and Learning Committee, which is a committee of the whole. Hopefully everyone will come there. But I think if they had said that it was related to dyslexia at the beginning, people would have had less concern.
What's interesting to me, it's like I felt like I got a little education reading that. There's a great debate going on the Independent. It's one of those ones where it's not mean. It's really, well, one or two people, but it's really about how, to me, it was about how the world looks different if you're black or you're white.
Yes.
And I heard from a lot of white people who consider themselves liberal, and we care a lot about civil rights, and their reaction was, this is so win-win. This is going to help kids with dyslexia in the world. It gives money to the school system. The woman who runs the study assigns the book about Henrietta Lacks to everyone who works on the project so that there's no exploitation. But if you're black and you have that whole history from Tuskegee on,
Yep.
you got to have it addressed. And I think if you're white, you think, well, it all sounds good.
Yeah.
Why would people make it a big deal? And if you're black, it's this is real. This has always happened. We got to have that.
And white people haven't had white researchers trying to say that they're genetically inadequate, and black people have. And at one point,
Wait, I'm sorry, I missed that. What does that mean?
well, there are a number of researchers that try to prove that.
Oh, you're talking about Shockley and
Yeah.
I know, and that white.
But
black
that's our
brains
history.
are inferior. Yeah,
Yes.
that was big.
It's
Yeah.
big, yes.
I mean, William F.
So we're
Buckley
not,
supported Shockley and was considered a respectable company. Yeah.
Yes. And so that's why black people, we have history that shows that sometimes this information is not used to our benefit as a part of the American community.
So it'll be interesting.
Yeah.
I think there's a very healthy debate.
I think
It's not always easy to happen, but it's the debates we have to have in our society.
And I think that if it were couched in the appropriate way so that it didn't seem like it was this wide open genetic study on reading, and it was limited to this whole question of dyslexia, that we would have perhaps had a slightly different
And why do you think it
discussion.
hadn't been discussed? This has been going on for years. Why did it come up now and not before?
I have no idea.
I'm wondering if it was the presentation and just, the visuals. There's this white person telling you you're spending all this money or getting all this money. And
No, I think that, I just think we have a more activist board that paid more attention.
All right. Well, that's a thumbs up then for that. Crown Street Garage. They have a space in the front on the bottom that used to be a nightclub, Boppers. You remember Clarence's in the 70s?
Yes.
Great jazz club. I used to go there. I love
Yeah,
that place.
yeah.
It's been empty for a while, and you guys are, meaning the city, you guys. The city has people competing to get the space to put in a new kind of concert venue or performance area that's in between what you get at the Schubert and the Crown Street Music Hall and nightclubs, like the kind of middle piece for that Crown Street district. It was supposed to have been done by now. Do you know what's going on or what the different
I
versions
know
are?
that they did an RFP or an RFQ to see what the proposal would be for that space. I don't know where we are with
It's
it.
kind of nice. Moy's around the corner does have
Right.
kind of a sit-down. Because I think of that sit-down.
Right.
I remember people would go to Clarence's Course just to jazz, and they'd be there almost 2 in the morning. Dwight Andrews, who was a jazz musician and a reverend. Some of his people would be there dressed up real nice till 2 in the morning hearing the jazz, then going to church, like not necessarily going to bed in between. But it would be nice to have that. So Moy's is smaller, but it has live music where you could sit down and have a dinner or drinks. And there's some great clubs like Cafe 9. What would you like to see in there? Because I think
Well-
they're talking about a little bigger than that.
Yeah, I
Different
think
kinds
it's going to be. I think over at College Street it's about 1,500 to 2,000. So I think this would probably be around 500.
Okay.
And so that it would be smaller.
Versus like the 40 at a Moy's, yeah.
Right. And so I think that's the thought. Certainly the College Street Music Hall folks broached the idea, and then the Schubert Theater also had some ideas. So there's going to be a little competition.
That's good. We like competition.
Exactly.
And where does it stand? Like, that's right. One delay was you wanted to give people a walkthrough.
Right.
So do you know when it's coming up?
I'm going to have to check with my economic development folks. to
This
see
is
where we
another
are.
example of that cognitive dissonance. So many good things are happening in town, and we're fighting so much these days because of financial pressures.
Well, it's tough, and nobody wants to spend any more money. But I wanted to make this point that if we hadn't reduced the taxes last year and had gone back to the year before last, then this tax increase wouldn't be that much. And if you look at both Hamden and West Haven, for the same house, it would probably in Hamden be even worth more than in New Haven.
Actually, I know everywhere you go, I wasn't about to clobber you on the taxes. I was bringing up just a general point that we have
Yeah,
financial
I'm
pressures
just-
and it's causing people. No, you want people to know that.
I just want people to
That's
know.
higher taxes in Hamden and West Haven,
Yes.
which is not what it used to be.
No, it used to not be that.
Okay, I understand. I didn't mean to interrupt
And
you.
I know, no, it's fine. I just wanted to make that point.
Well,
Because sometimes people think that, like that they're burdened, but, there are some towns that are a lot less in our region, but not our most direct neighbors.
All right. And so one thing I'd ask you is by the way, if you need $10, just ask me because I own a home in New Haven. And thanks to the Board of Alders, I'm going to have $10 more
Maybe.
because maybe 10 because they
we didn't run the numbers. It might not be that much.
Yeah, we tried to do the numbers best we could on Deadline last week. So the Board of Alders last week was mad that you gave taxes to some of your top aides and some of the people who aren't in unions who hadn't gotten taxes. In some
You
cases,
mean raises, yeah.
raises. They hadn't gotten raises in some cases 5 or 6 years.
Right.
Some like 3 or 4. So you gave them the raises. They were really mad at you. They didn't like the way you did it. And it added up to $483,000 over 2 years. So now they passed a law last week, I think unanimously, that they're going to take that money out of the budgets of the departments where they got the raises.
We don't think they can.
Oh, really? Tell me about that.
We think it's against the charter of the city. So we're having some people look at it. The Board of Alders gets a time certain when they can pass a budget.
Mm-hmm.
And any changes to that budget have to be initiated by the mayor. That's our reading of it. So, we'll see.
So are you thinking of what would you do if you conclude they had no right to do that? You take them to court?
Perhaps.
Ooh. Are you thinking of a court case?
Perhaps.
Well, what does perhaps mean?
That
Like,
it's
yes, we
not
had a meeting, but I don't want to threaten it yet.
It's not. I mean, it depends upon what they haven't done anything yet.
Oh, they passed the law. But you think
No,
they
they
haven't moved
haven't.
it?
Yeah, they
Okay.
haven't moved it yet. So
Okay.
we'll see.
That's very interesting. But the biggest issue in town last week was KCS's closing. That's the
Cheese
restaurant.
people, have you had some of their cheese? It's
No,
so
I'm vegan.
wonderful.
So my
Oh,
whole
you can't have cheese either.
right. So my wife and my daughters love KCS. It was their favorite place to go to dinner when we were growing up. So that
Uh-huh.
was always we did that in the night when I was working.
Oh, really?
People
Oh,
love
their
Casey's.
cheese
It's like
is
a
so
lodestar.
good. And and I know they don't want to do cheese anymore, but who's going to do cheese in the city then?
Well, they are going to do cheese, just not as much cheese.
Okay.
So they're keeping a cheese truck and they're keeping the menu, but they're going to have not as much cheese. And they actually said, and I know this must have killed Jason Sobocinski, who was all about pork and cheese, that they're hearing from a lot of vegetarians and vegans. Not from me, by the way. I think it's fine if people have their cheese store. There are lots of great options around New Haven. But he did like one night where he did a vegan thing, just try it with vegan cheese and other stuff. And they got all these people paying $60 in a big crowd. And
Really?
so he just said, you got to change with the times, which is cool.
That is
So he said
good.
he's still going to have the great Casey's cheeses, but maybe 1/4 of the menu around the whole menu and trying some of his. He has a lot
Will
of.
you be able to buy the cheeses downstairs?
I think so,
like
but
you
I'm not
can now?
sure. I'm not sure, but I
Because
think
that's
so.
what I like.
He
being
said
able
to
get-
go was going to be a bigger part.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But you were talking about this earlier about entrepreneurs. You think of how successful this guy is, Jason Sobocinski. He
Right.
started with he did Ordinary, he did Casey's. He has this great beers.
Mm-hmm.
He has a great beer company, and he changes with the times.
And I think you've
that's how
got
he
to
stayed in
do that.
business. Yeah.
And more and more people want fresh food. I mean, I think that's actually commendable.
But we got to make sure you get your cheese. And from what we heard from our readers, it's not just you, Tony Harp. It's like pretty much 110% of New Haven.
I know it's
They swear by Casey's
some of their
cheese.
cheese is wonderful.
So what do we got coming up this week? You told us about the hearing on the DNA.
Yeah, we're going to do that on July 18th over at 54 Meadow Street in the big room there. We're going to be doing Mill River Crossing, which is the old Farnham Courts. We're going to be cutting a ribbon.
Right. I was wondering
Yes.
when that ribbon's going to be cut. That thing's been open a while.
Yeah.
It's really nice, isn't it?
Yep, it looks beautiful from the street. And we're going to be cutting the ribbon to the firing range on Friday.
That's a big week we got coming up. We do have to pause sometimes and think about how great it is to live in New Haven
Yes.
and how, times are tough in some ways and we work it out, but so many good things happen here.
Absolutely. And the public is involved in so much of it.
Like the firing range.
Yes.
That wouldn't happen without public saying, like, we can't tell if someone's getting shot or what, and it's all
Mhm.
night in New Hallville, and now it's going to be, according to Giovanni's in, he tested it out and ducked the bullets and didn't hear him.
Yeah, we heard ping, ping, not boom, boom.
We can deal with ping ping.
Yeah.
Oh, Mayor Harp, thanks so much for joining us as always.
All right.
I learn a lot every week when and I hope our listeners do too. Thanks everybody who wrote in the questions. Love to hear from you. Kamari, thanks for the pronunciation lesson. God, I hope I remember that next week. Thanks to Gateway Community College and Bertram Moses PC for providing financial support for today's program. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience, performing I Wish I Knew. How it would feel to be free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. What do you think about A Plea for Peace?
I love it.
I do too. We got to renew those pleas, right?
Absolutely.
Now, we know what it's like to be free. We just got to remember to book our flight. Fly free with us all day and all night long here at WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.